this particular passage, which was connected to questions 83, 84, 85 and 86, was about speech. There was a very interesting point mentioned in the passage, or what the passage wanted to say was basically that speech in humans is higher than the speech that animals have, and what makes it special is that we have the ability to not just form general concepts but also understand what we are saying, as was explained here with a very interesting example, a very good example at that, that even a dog frames general concepts of cats and sheep, and he knows specifically how to bark. He knows the corresponding words which are going to come out when he sees a cat or when he sees a sheep. This is exactly what a philosopher might also do. So then just making general concepts, framing general concepts, is not what differentiates our speech to that with that of animals, but it is rather the vocal intelligence and the capacity to understand. That is what we have here. Now if you move on to question number 83, it says, according to the passage, the curious cases of brain disease illustrate which of the following. If you were to turn to the first paragraph here, it says that the intimate connection between the brain as it is now developed in us and the faculty of the speech is well shown by the curious cases of brain disease, in which sometimes speech is affected or impeded, and that is exactly why we come up with option B as the answer for question number 83. It says that elemental correlation exists within the brain and speech organs, that since there is sometimes certain things go wrong with the brain, that is exactly why there is an intimate connection between the brain and speech organs. That is why our faculty of speech fails if you have brain disease, and that is why the answer to question number 83 is option B. You had to read the passage very carefully in order to answer question number 84 correctly. The answer to question number 84 is C, since the question says, according to the passage, the judgment on language implies all except which of the following. Option A reads, the use of language implies the power of forming general concepts. Yes, it has been mentioned in the passage that forming general concepts comes from our use of the language, and this is one thing which is similar in us and animals. There are other things which make the differentiation between the language we use and the language that animals use. Option B can also be inferred or implied from the part about judgment. It says the use of language forms an impassable barrier between man and animal. Yes. How come is it an impassable barrier? Because the language that we use, we understand the words, we have cognition, we develop our thought, but then we animals do not understand the words that they speak, and that is what differentiates us and is an impassable barrier. While D also says that the use of language is indispensable to the development of thought. Yes, it's mentioned there, while C says that it is essential to the development of cognition. Now let me take you back to that part in the paragraph where this particular part is concerned. See, over here it says, because about Bleek's views, it says, because on the grand scale language is the necessary auxiliary of thought, it says, indispensable or very essential for the development of the power of thinking, which means thought, not cognition. Instead it continues to say then that to the distinctness and variety and complexity of cognitions, to the full mastery of consciousness, but over here he straight away says that it is indispensable or really essential for the development of the power of thought. And that is why for this particular question, which is question number 84, we mark option D option C as the correct answer. This is the only one which cannot be inferred or implied from the text. Question number 85 wants to know, according to the passage, the statement, "There is no thought without words as little as there are words without thought," illustrates which one of the following? And the passage straight away, very simply, goes on to say or ascribes this axiom to Max Muller. It's over here in the paragraph. I can mark it for you. It says Max Muller gives in italics this particular axiom or aphorism, which is, "There is no thought without words as little as there are words without thought." That is the part in the paragraph which leads us to believe that answer A, option A, is the answer for question number 85. Now for question number 86, if you have read the passage, you will have come up to this conclusion that the passage mainly deals with the development of the organs of communication in let's say man and animals, and how this differentiates us humans from, let's say, apes or lower animals or other animals as well. Now this is why when the question says that the next paragraph of the passage is likely to deal with which of the following, we know that the answer for question number 86 has to be A, which says that of all the differences between man and the lower animals, the vocal faculty is by far the most important. This is exactly the conclusion, or this is what is the theme that the next paragraph after the last one, which has been given to us, will continue with. That is what is the theme, that vocal faculty or speech organs are the most important thing, or is the most important thing that creates the difference between man and lower animals. B speaks of the general theory of evolution, and that it is extremely improbable that apes could not catch up with man again. This is not what we are going to go into with the next paragraph after the last paragraph. It's far-fetched, I should say. C says that the mental faculties in man had become highly developed, superseding all. This again is not in connection with the entire theme of the passage, so it is but obvious that we will not continue with this in the next paragraph. It's the same with D, that it does not follow this the scope or the theme of the passage, and that is how we are stuck with question A, or we come up with question A as option A, I'm sorry, as the correct answer to question number 86. Question number 86 was a question based on grammar. It's sentence correction. The question reads, "The following question consists of 4 sentences on a topic. Some sentences are grammatically incorrect or inappropriate. Select the option that indicates the grammatically correct and appropriate sentence." Now to figure out which one is the correct one, grammatically correct one, let's go one by one. Obviously option A cannot be the answer since it has much, have, owed. We know that the singular word much cannot go with a plural verb have, and that is why we cannot have these together. It needs to be that much has owed more to the few that we care to acknowledge. That is what it should be. So we eliminate option A. In option C, as you can see here, it says, concluding a speech, the scientist somewhat paraphrased Churchill's famous wartime statement, and in the process, it continues, the scientist owed more to the few in the field. So what this particular option is suggesting, that owing to the few, this part, owing to the few, is in fact an effect of the scientist paraphrasing Churchill's statement, right? Now this we know is not the case, because eventually the given sentence, it means that the scientist concluded his speech by saying that in the field of research and development, many people owe more to the few than we care to acknowledge. That is what is the actual sentence, that is what is the actual meaning, that is what needs to come out of the particularly correct sentence, which in fact is option B here. It says, the scientist concluded his speech by saying, to somewhat paraphrase Churchill's famous wartime statement, which also connects to the fact that the scientist paraphrased Churchill. In the field of research and development, that was the paraphrase. more that has been owed by the many to the few than we care to acknowledge. This is what is the correct option. To eliminate option D, we can read it. It says the scientist concluded his speech by asking Churchill to somewhat paraphrase his wartime statement. No, the scientist did not ask Churchill to paraphrase any statement. He was, in fact, the scientist was paraphrasing Churchill's statement, and that's why we know that this option is incorrect. So we know that the correct option for question 86 is I'm sorry, question number 87 is option B. Question number 88 was a para summary question. The text given here talks about language, that since the scientific revolution, most linguists see language as a code, that even though it represents or talks about actual things in the perceived world or in the world that we see, it has no internal connection to that world, and hence we can readily separate language to the things that it explains or represents in the actual world. Now you had to find out which one of these options given here links to the or gives you the perfect summary of what has been given to you in the text. The answer to this question is option D, which says language represents the world but is separable from it. I just explained it to you. I'll explain it again. It says here that language in this view, through as viewed by most linguists today, is rather like a code. It says here that it is a way of representing the actual things or events in the world that we see or perceive, but still it has no internal connections or close connections to this world, and hence we can readily separate language to these things that it represents. Option A says that that language is a set of rules, is an assumption. Yes, but then this again is very narrow. It does not completely cover the entire paragraph or the entire text. Again, B is another narrow statement. It says by attending solely to the denotative and conventional aspect of verbal communication, we cannot hold ourselves apart. This particular part is a judgment in itself. It says we cannot hold ourselves apart from or outside of the rest of the animate nature. No, this is not the summary to the paragraph. Option C again can be eliminated, since we are not talking about, again for B, and I can repeat, we are not talking of verbal communication, we are instead talking about language, and this is why we come up with option D as the correct answer for question number 88. Option C is again a very narrow one. It just talks about set of rules and codes. This is only one part of what was mentioned about language in the entire text. As I would repeat, question 88, the answer is option D. It's good to know your grammar in and out, people. Question number 89 tested you on grammar. It says, given below is a sentence, a part of which has been underlined. Beneath the sentence you will find 4 ways of phrasing the underlined part. Select the correct answer in terms of grammar and usage. The question said, a penguin species that lived millions of years ago would dwarf today's big living penguins and stood taller than most humans according to the analysis of fossils by a team of researchers from the La Plata Museum in Argentina. Now, the given sentence suggests, we get this feel from the sentence, that there existed a species of penguins once which were bigger than the biggest penguins alive on the planet today. Right, that's what we are, or not necessarily today, let's say just the biggest penguins alive ever on the planet. That's what we are trying to say. So therefore we come up with answer, as the answer we have option B, which says that a penguin species that lived millions of years ago would have dwarfed today's biggest living penguins and stood as tall as most humans. This is exactly what we are trying to say in the text or in the original sentence. See, we can eliminate A and C as well together, since they both talk of penguins which were alive once, that you know, they talk about the possibility of these penguins that existed in the past dwarfing today's penguins in the future, and this is not something that we are trying to get to. For instance, A says would be dwarfing today's biggest living penguins and stand tall. This part is grammatically incorrect, as we know. Again, C says will dwarf today's biggest living penguins and be standing as tall as. That is not what we are looking at, that they will dwarf. No, they would have. That is what we are trying to say, that they would, when they existed, they would have dwarfed in that period. In the past, they would have dwarfed today's biggest living penguins, and that is why these two, A and C, cannot be taken as the answer. Now, out of options B and D, which were left, then had we eliminated A and C, D could have been again eliminated, because the act of dwarfing is not a continuous action. See, if you read option D here, it says would have been dwarfing, which is they would have continued to do that. No, so the act of dwarfing is not a continuous action. It's just there that it happened in the past, and that is why we come up with option B as the correct answer for question number 89. Question number 90 was a critical reasoning question, an interesting one at that. It talks about, in short, I'll explain it to you. It says that there was once an anti-rubella vaccination program that the government had started, which was 7 years. It continued on for 7 years, and now state hospitals or the government has taken a decision to cut costs and discontinue this particular program. This is what this entire thing has been brought to us by a World Health Organization WHO official. Now he also says that the health minister has defended this move by the government to stop the anti-rubella vaccination by arguing that it has been several years now that there have been no cases of rubella in these few years, and this is why the government has decided to stop the vaccination program. Furthermore, the WHO official says that they are skeptical of this move by the government to stop the anti-rubella vaccination, since he says that imports of meat, which are pretty frequent in the state from other countries, they pose a risk of disease, even though vaccines might be available for such diseases, but then there is a risk. He says that a couple of years ago there was a similar case that the government had reduced the use of the Haemophilus influenza vaccines, and then suddenly after the government had stopped the usage, there was a minor outbreak among children. Please note here that children is a key word, which then convinced the government to resume or restart the usage of the vaccine, of the Haemophilus influenza vaccine. Now this is the argument that the WHO official is using in order to say perhaps that the government should not stop the anti-rubella vaccination program. Now for the critical reasoning question, the stem says, the question stem reads, the WHO official's statements, if true, best support which of the following as a conclusion? Which of these options would you conclude or would be supported by whatever the WHO official has said? The answer to this question is option A. It says there is a need to protect young children in Jharkhand against the risk of a possible rubella outbreak. See, now when it comes to Jharkhand, we know at least this, that the citizenry is immune. If I bring you back to the question here, it says that we know that the citizenry is, at least the citizens are immune because of the vaccine, right? Because of the anti-rubella vaccine. It has been going on for 7 years. There have been no cases. That's what it says. But if they stop immunizing further, we know that the unvaccinated people, which are the newer generation, the young children, I told you that children is a key word here, will be vulnerable to this highly infectious virus, as it mentions here in the passage. Now, knowing this, we know that at least the children, at least their unvaccinated immune systems, if I could put it that way, would be at risk for catching rubella, which is the virus there. Now this is why we know that answer option A is the correct one. It says there is a need to protect at least young children. That is what we know. We cannot speak about the other citizens, but we know that considering also the case of Haemophilus influenza, which broke out suddenly after the vaccines had been stopped, we can say that there is a risk to the young children in Jharkhand against the risk of a possible rubella outbreak. It might break out again, and that is why there is a need to protect them and immunize them. Option B suggests that meat imports could have brought in the rubella disease into the state. We do not know whether diseases could be introduced through these imports or not, or even if they are, let's say that there are diseases coming in through these meat imports, there is no reason to conclude that these meats are unrefrigerated. It says here that studies have revealed that improper refrigeration during shipping in the meat industry, this connects to the diseases coming in any way. This has not been mentioned in that part of the passage where it talked about meat imports, right? So improper refrigeration, we cannot say, that's out of the scope of what has been mentioned to us. Option C is let's say unsubstantiated, since we have no way to compare the infection rates. It says rubella far surpasses Haemophilus influenza in fatality rates and is hence much more deadly. We can't say that because we have no way to compare the rates of fatality rates of rubella with Haemophilus influenza, so we cannot take this particular answer. Also, the text makes no specific comment on the cost of anti-rubella shots, and it doesn't say that this is exactly why the government has cut down. It just says that they're cutting cost. We do not know that the cost is undue or it is very high for the state health agencies to bear, and that is why option D gets eliminated. There might be other costs involved, perhaps. It might not just be the anti-rubella shots, which are expensive, and that's why we know that the proper option for this question, for question number 90, is option A. I hope you've understood the answer, the question and its solution very well now.